Hello. Today we're going to talk about the old saying, practice makes perfect. You've probably heard it a lot with sports, with any type of habits. You know, the more you practice something, the better you get at it. Well, I've always heard that, and it really makes sense, and it's kind of logical. But this past softball season, I decided to help Coach Cameron with our softball team. And one of the first things that I learned from Coach Cameron was a wonderful saying about practice makes perfect. And she says, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So let's talk about that. We're going to talk about it from a softball standpoint, and then we're going to talk about it from comparing it to other things that we can apply it to in our life. Because you're probably thinking, I'm not a softball player. What does this have to do with me? Hold on. We're going to get there. I promise you it does. So what Coach Cameron tells her softball players is perfect practice makes perfect. So if you want to have the best throw, if you want to be the best player, if you want to be the best batter on the softball team, you know, it takes breaking down those steps. You can't just go out and throw the ball. And just because you have a fast throw doesn't mean it's accurate. So how do we perfect it? How do we use our practice time to step by step get it right? Now, I wish Coach Cameron was here. It's social distancing, so she can't be. So I am going to really try and explain this from the softball aspect and surely not mess it up too bad. So here we go. So when the softball players hit the field every day at practice, they all pair up and get on one knee. So you're thinking, all right, we're going to practice throwing, but we're starting on our knee. Why is that? Because we have broken down every part of the throw. So the first thing we do is wrist snaps, and we're literally throwing the ball back and forth to our partners very close together, and all we're worried about is snapping the ball. Are we holding our fingers on the ball like we're supposed to, and are we snapping it? Once we finish that, we're going to put our elbow in our glove, and then we're going to start throwing this way to make sure we're still doing the wrist like we're supposed to, and now we've got the elbow component into it. Then we do what she calls the Statue of Liberty. You're going to reach for the sky. And so now you've distanced yourself a little bit further away from your partner, and you're starting to really throw. You've got your arm up, but you're worried about where your elbow and your wrist are as well. So then once we finish that, we stand up, and then we continue to worry about our throw. Where's our elbow, our wrist, our shoulder, our eyes, our fingers on the ball at all times? Where are they? Are we doing it the right way? And we have to ask our partners, hey, are you doing it the right way? Let's be kind, but let's call each other out and help each other perfect each step of that. So once that's finished, then we go further apart from our partner, and then we pick up speed. And then we think about the throw. Because in practice, you can do every single step slowly. And if you train your body and you have that muscle memory, then when you get in a game and you've got to throw quick, your muscles remember everything you've practiced because you've practiced and you've practiced it perfectly. So when you're in a game and you do a quick throw, every part of your arm, your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist, your eyes, your fingertips are all where they're supposed to be because of that perfect practice. So now does that make a little more sense why perfect practice makes perfect? If all we were doing is going out there and tossing the ball and throwing the ball and not worried about accuracy, just worried about speed, think about the difference that would be in a game compared to our perfect practice and how that's making perfect. So enough of the softball analogy. Let's move that into our daily lives, and how does that affect all of us, and how can we use this concept with other things? So the first thing I want you to do, let's go with math, because that's Coach Cameron's favorite subject, and she's an awesome math teacher as well as a softball coach. So I know even if you don't have, or if you had Coach Cameron in the past, regardless, all of your math teachers, how many times have you heard, show your work, show your work? I'm not going to give you a grade. I don't care if you have the right answer. You have to show your work. Well, let's think about that from a perfect practice makes perfect standpoint. If you're showing your work, a lot of math problems have formulas that you can apply to the situation, but when you show your steps, that's showing every part of how you solve that math problem. So if there was an issue with getting the right answer, the teacher can go back and say, hey, this is the step that you're not getting right. Just like in throwing a softball, maybe it was in the wrist, maybe it was in the elbow. So when you show your work in a math problem, it's going to help us figure out where we're missing the mark. so that we can continue to have perfect practice. Let's apply that to something outside of academics or athletics. Let's think about it from maybe a friendship standpoint. Maybe you know somebody who has a lot of friends. Okay, you've probably heard the expression too, quality over quantity. Well, somebody might have a lot of friends because they're nice to people, they're friendly, but have they practiced perfect practice in being a friend? Are they trustworthy? Think about all the characteristics of a good friend. You also hear the saying that in order to have good friends, you need to be a good friend. So what does a good friend really look like? And somebody that has a lot of friends, are they have all the characteristics, all those details that makes a perfect friend? So when looking at friendships and building friendships, we can think about perfect practice making perfect. So we can think about being trustworthy, being a good listener, being available to your friend, checking in on them when you know they've had a bad day. All those type of small things that we can practice every day with the friends we have or with people that we want to be friends with. A friendship just doesn't start with a hello and then all of a sudden you're best friends. You've got to build on that. And so when you're practicing perfect friendship skills, you're getting to those quality friends. And so sometimes when you look at one person that may have a lot of friends, it may be like that fast throw in softball. Is it accurate? Is it perfect? Is it what it needs to be? Or was it just fast? Does this person have a lot of friends because they're just nice on the surface? Or have they practiced perfect friendship and friendship skills? So what I want you guys to do is first think of a strength. We all have them. We all have our weaknesses, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But think about one thing you're really strong in. It could be an athletic sport. It could be in another type of activity such as singing, playing a musical instrument, taekwondo, or it could be academics. Maybe you have a great subject and something that just really sticks to you well. Maybe it's something that your friends always compliment you on about your personality, something that you're really good at doing. So what I want you to do is think about something that you really are good at and is one of your strengths. And then I want you to break that back down into how have you practiced that perfectly. And I bet you might think to yourself, well, I haven't, because this is the first time I've heard perfect practice makes perfect. But if you really think about it and it's your strength, you can break it down. So think about what is it that you do regularly, maybe even daily, maybe multiple times a day to make sure that that strength remains your strength. It's obviously something that you devote time to, that you're focused on, that you're excited about, and that you want to have as your strength. So take a few minutes. You can pause this video or do it when we're done and write down the steps of your perfect practice to get to that strength that you have. Again, it could be academics, sports or activity related. Maybe it's a personality trait that you have. And think about all the things you do to focus and make that a strength. I think that'll be a fairly easy assignment. So part 2 is going to be a little more challenging. So now what I want you to do is take a weakness of yours. We all have them. Maybe it's a subject you don't do well in, you don't understand it well. Maybe it's a sport that you want to play or a skill or a concept that you want to improve on. Maybe it's throwing because you're on the baseball team, or making baskets because you're on the basketball team, or learning a certain composition that you're practicing on your musical instrument. Maybe it is a personality trait. Maybe it is friendship. Maybe it's empathy. Something that you really wish you could be better at. We all have weaknesses and we all need to work on them. So now what I want you to do is take that perfect practice details of your strength and apply that to your weakness. What can you do to practice to get better at that skill? What can you do regularly, maybe daily? Is it checking in with someone who has a strength in that area that could help you with it? Just like in softball, we pair up and we throw back and forth to one another, and our partner's supposed to help us and give constructive criticism and say, hey, how about you try it this way? Hey, I noticed that maybe you're doing this incorrectly and let's adjust. So can you find somebody in your weakness area that maybe that's their strength and partner up with them to give you that support? What can you do daily to focus on that? Is it that you don't understand a certain subject and maybe devoting a little bit of time and maybe organizing your thoughts and your process on how you study for that subject? Is it friendship? Is it empathy? Is it self-compassion? A lot of us, especially at middle school age, have a hard time appreciating ourselves, giving ourselves a pat on the back, and really focusing on our strengths. And so maybe that's something you want to work on. So maybe if that's your weakness and that's what you want to work on, maybe you start with an affirmation that you write down and tell yourself every day, and that you say it in the mirror. You know, what are we going to do every day on a regular basis to build up our weakness? And so when we have perfect practice with those steps, then we become more perfect in that area. And then our weakness starts to become a strength. Now, the also challenging part of that is we have to continue to work at keeping our strengths. So we have to continue that perfect practice while we're also picking up things to build our weaknesses. And so my next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about time management and organization of our schedules, especially since we're all distance learning. So we have a little more freedom, maybe, and we don't have the structure of a school day, or when assignments are due, we have some more flexibility. So how are we going to organize ourselves and keep ourselves focused on what we need to be? And so maybe that's an area where we can begin to have perfect practice in our organizational skills. So that's my next video. But for today, after we finish this, I want you, again, to write down a strength and think about how you practice that perfectly on a regular basis. And then I want you to take one of your weaknesses and give yourself some ideas on how you can practice perfectly so that that weakness becomes maybe not a strength, because we're always all going to have weaknesses, but maybe you can improve your skill in that area and feel better about it. So if you'd like to chat or talk, you can go to the Google Classroom that you've been invited to and ask me for an appointment. You can email me directly, and you can also still go to our counselor's website and submit an electronic request for an appointment like you always have, and I'll be glad to follow up and chat with you and see how you're doing on your perfect practice. Thanks, Seahawks.